Man, this book felt like it came out of nowhere. Get it? Nowhere? Because Spencer's in the nowhere? Oh, come on! I can't win with you guys! Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sandbox, the next chapter in the Skyward series, or Cytoverse as some people like to call it. It's finally here, so I'm going to share my thoughts on it and give as much of an unbiased review as I can. Fair warning, Brandon Sanderson is my favorite working author right now, but I am not going to go easy on him today. So, with that said, let's get started. Starting off with the writing, as I like to do, I think Cytonic is actually a step back from the previous two main series novels. Skyward felt fairly mature for a young adult sci-fi, in my opinion. I'm seeing some people say otherwise, but I think we can all agree that Starsight, despite whether you like it or not, does grow up Spencer's character quite a bit and increases the stakes within the story. Spencer matured in those 6 months that passed after Skyward, and Starsight's writing portrayed that, particularly with Spencer's voice. However, with Cytonic, it actually feels like she's regressed a bit. In the first chapter alone, there are a few Spencer-isms that I don't remember her using in the first two, most notably her using like as if she is some sort of California Valley girl. And the overall tone, especially in the beginning, just felt off to me. Spencer does return to form in the middle and end of this book, but something about the beginning just didn't sit right. As far as pacing goes, it's fine. It's a quick read, especially compared to the first two, as this is the shortest one yet, but it wasn't exactly obvious where this one was going until halfway through, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you just love to spend time with Spencer and don't really care how quickly the plot around her is moving. However, for me, again, it just contributed to the book not feeling quite right in the beginning. Now, thematically speaking, I think Cytonic is a good continuation of the first two without feeling too repetitive. It explores similar themes in a different setting with a new cast of characters who have different backgrounds and motives from previous ones. But moving on to the story, I think this is the weakest one yet, which is only made worse by the fact that I thought the premise for this one was more interesting than the first two. Starsight ended with Spencer throwing herself into some sort of portal that leads to the nowhere, and Cytonic picks up from there, exploring the nowhere as well as the history of the Delvers and Cytonics. It's a great concept that really just amounted to a new solo adventure for Spencer, where she meets a new cast of characters and has to train them in the ways of starfighting. Now, looking back on it, the book feels very in line with the series, and it seems to be setting up that fourth and final book, Defiant, very well, but on initial read, I felt that my excitement and wonder was quickly demoralized. The stakes and action here are also very weak relative to the first two. The action is more of the same with no real jaw-dropping scenes, and the stakes are quickly removed from fighting for spoiler reasons that I won't delve into. There is a new stake introduced as she is in the nowhere and this place goes by different rules than the somewhere, but Sanderson never makes it feel like a big enough threat to make me worry for Spencer's sake. This mission is less about action and stakes and more of an intel gathering discovery mission. And to be honest, as great as the reveals were, I didn't think that they deserved the page count ahead of them, which is already incredibly short for the series. But speaking of the nowhere, let's dive into the setting for this book and the world building at play. Similarly to how Rhythm of War is the biggest world building book in the Stormlight archive, especially in terms of the Cosmere, Cytonic feels like the world building book for the Skyward series. It plunges Spencer into a whole new plane of existence with new rules that affect appetite, memories, and a general sense of time. I was really looking forward to seeing what the nowhere looked like, and I would say for the most part, my expectations were met, though I know some readers weren't crazy about it. But I'd say if you go into this one expecting a young adult sci-fi, knowing what you know about Sanderson and the Skyward series so far, the nowhere will probably meet your expectations as well. That said, this book does not progress the tech involved in the story so much as it further develops the Cytonic powers and the history surrounding them. It fills in a lot of gaps and builds off of Redawn incredibly well in that regard. Now, you will hear a lot of complaints about this, as Cytonic feels like it shifts the series from sci-fi into fantasy sci-fi, Skyward, for the most part, felt very grounded, but Starsight's reveal with the Tanix definitely started this shift, and I personally expected it to continue with this book. So while I can see where those complaints are coming from, I didn't feel like the shift came out of nowhere. Get it? Is it funnier the second time? I mean, hey, it's what Sanderson does best. His magic systems are incredible, and Cytonic powers are no different. They're fun, and they use softer rules of magic than Sanderson is used to using, and I think the younger audience is really getting a kick out of them. But now I've saved the best for last, the most controversial component to this book, the characters. I think the main criticism about Cytonic is that if you didn't like Skyward Flight's absence in Starsight, then you will be disappointed in Cytonic as well. However, the good news is that there are currently 3 novellas planned out, 2 of which are already out, that give us exactly that, more time with Skyward Flight. I certainly think that Sanderson could have incorporated Sunreach into Starsight and Redawn and Evershore into Cytonic. However, I'm also fine with Sanderson doing what he thinks will service the story best. Yes, Cytonic could have been condensed to allow for these novellas, but this is what we got. And at the worst, we just get more time to spend with Spensa. But as for the new cast that's introduced in this one, they're all hit or miss for me. Chet is one of my new favorites in the series, and I think everyone will really get a kick out of him. And I also really liked the character Peg, who is a new type of alien introduced to the Cytoverse. The rest were forgettable for the most part, but they all did their jobs. However, as for the villains, I think Cytonic took a real step back and became almost irrelevant. At least with Skyward, the mystery was there, but now that we know who the players are, it felt like the villains, in particular Winzik and Braid, took too big of a back seat. Sure, Sanderson is putting them into position for the final confrontation in Defiant, but they're still more or less absent from this one. The Delvers become the main threat here, but even they feel more like a nuisance or a roadblock than an actual threat that I should fear. We are told throughout the book that they themselves fear Spensa for having corrupted one in the last book, so any bite that they had previously feels neutered here. Meanwhile, the other minor villains that are introduced feel like chump change in relation to previous ones, and they're just primarily there to move the story along. However, I think Chet and Embot are the saving graces to this book. Both of their relationships with Spensa feel so unique and fascinating that you just can't help but love them all. I think Embot's arc in particular is one of the best in this series, and I just can't wait to see how Sanderson utilizes both of these characters in the final chapter of this story. Cytonic starts off as a jumbled mess, but becomes a super fun ride once it finds its footing, filled with zany characters within an interesting new pocket of the universe. I think this book has the best reveal of the entire series so far, but the rest of the reveals don't feel like they deserve the number of pages you have to get through to learn them. This book is way out there, shifting almost to full-on fantasy, but I think knowing that going into it will soften the blow. I struggled with my final score on this one more than any other book, but I've landed on a 7 out of 10. I could see it as a 7.5 as the reveals are huge for the series and the big character moments are some of the best that we've gotten, but given how long it takes to get to them and the fact that Skyward Flight is absent twice in a row, I can see this as a 6.5 as well. It is not as strong as the 2 before it, but I still think this is worth the read. Just remember, it's a YA, it's meant to be silly and fun, and it seems like the younger audience is really enjoying it. But let me know your thoughts on Cytonic down in the comments below. Where would you put this one in your ranking? I'll be doing a ranking video myself after Evershore comes out, and that'll be a 3-parter, a cover art ranking, a character tier list, and a ranking on all 3 books and 3 novellas. And I'll be certain to dive more into spoilers there and give my speculations on what Defiant will bring. But as for now, that's it from me. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I will see you all next time.